I think one of the most impactful things that we can do, that means following as close as possible to a day-night pattern of the sun rising and sun setting. We can at least put the phone away in another room, wake up each morning without the distraction of this.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast presented by Cornerstone International Alliance. I am your host, Nick Olson. On this show, I get the opportunity to talk with the brightest minds in lower middle market M&A. Together, we discuss industry intelligence, deal management, shared successes, specialized expertise, and much more. If you serve the small to medium-sized business owner, this show will offer you tactics and insights you can use and implement now to become a master in M&A. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast. My guest today is the emotional health mentor to entrepreneurs, executives, and their companies. He created his 5 pillars of health. He spent 8 years at Goldman Sachs. He then transformed his life and achieved his doctorate of naturopathic medicine. Today, he is a keynote speaker and best-selling author of The Emotionally Healthy You. Through his mentorship, he equips leaders with the skills to thrive without sacrificing health, relationships, or joy. Please welcome my guest today, Dr. Karthik Ramanan. Dr. K, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Nick. How are you?
I am doing great, and I appreciate you taking the opportunity or taking the time to give our listeners the opportunity to hear your expertise in emotional health and as it relates to business owners. We're going to talk about today, what are some strategies that they can employ that will benefit the business having, quality emotional health, and I'll go through your 5 pillars of what that looks like of the importance of having strong emotional health. So, but to start us off, kick us off, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, yeah, like you said, I went through a journey of my own that kind of informed the rest of my career, but also why I do what I do. There's something incredibly painful about working so hard for so many years and reaching that next level, whether it's a corporate career, whether it's your business. It's the thing that you have told yourself that you wanted. And then as you get closer and closer to that goal, or maybe even hit that goal, you're no happier than you were before. And I think it's such a tragedy, because think about all the sacrifices that we may have made along the way to get there. Maybe it's aspects of our relationships, our family life, maybe it's our own health. And just to get to that finish line and then be no better off up here than you were when you started, it's a painful feeling. Blessed that I got to experience that in my, my mid-late 20s, just going through my corporate career and just really achieving everything I wanted to achieve. Yet recognizing that there was still something missing. And when I really dove into it, realizing, yes, the professional success is amazing. What I really wanted more than anything else was a great relationship and marriage and deeply meaningful work. And those two things felt so far away. But ultimately, when you hit rock bottom, you're willing to do the things you weren't otherwise willing to do. And around that time of just really questioning my life choices and everything that got me to that point, I saw my sister after a 3-month window of time, and she had lost 30 pounds. Cystic acne had cleared up, and she just looked incredible and vibrant. And I was just at that point that I said, okay, whatever you did, I'm going to do. So I asked her what she did, and she's telling me about this raw food, plant-based diet. It just sounds so crazy. And I was like, all right, fine, whatever. I have nothing to lose. But what I didn't know is that that was not only going to send me on a journey of losing 100 pounds, but also helping me recognize that there's something deeply fulfilling when other people come to you for advice and help, and you're able to help them get to that next level of whatever it is that they want. Now, in that case, it was health. And I just recognized, okay, I've got to make this my career. So yes, I made the dumbest financial decision of my life to leave a very well-paying career and then go into tremendous amounts of student debt again for medical school. But, sometimes it's those illogical things, but that are actually the things that you have to do. And so, but yeah, I did, I left New York, I moved to Arizona to go to medical school. I met the love of my life in medical school. And now I get to do something that, means a lot to me in terms of how do we achieve all the things that we want to achieve in our businesses. And especially when we're talking about, leading up to that exit stage, we think, okay, yeah, I just want to retire. And I can't tell you the number of times I've worked with clients and yeah, They say one thing here, but in terms of the actions that are happening and really self-sabotage at times, it's actually hard to let go because there's so many elements of who they see themselves to be that the business provides, and it's very difficult. And so ultimately, if our emotional health is not in peak shape, we make poor decisions, we strain our relationships, we accelerate burnout.
What are some, how do you know? So, I mean, first, kind of hit on it there, but you maybe dive a little deeper into what is our emotional health. What are the key components? So you talk about in your intro, you got 5 pillars of emotional health. Maybe take our listeners through what those 5 pillars are, and then kind of dive in deeper into that.
Perfect. What is emotional health? Emotional health is your ability to identify, to process, and to act upon what you're feeling in the moment and over the course of time. So things that might be dragging us down for a duration of time, again, being able to identify, process, and act. What am I feeling? What do I need to do to process through it? And then how do I want to act upon this? Oftentimes we're just stuck in this reaction mode. Something happens, we react. Sometimes that works in our favor, sometimes it doesn't. Oftentimes it doesn't, especially when it has to do with interpersonal relationships and things like that. And so being able to just really take a micro pause and have these tools in our emotional health tool belt for how to navigate these situations makes the biggest difference. So the other way to think about your emotional health is your emotional intelligence plus your emotional resilience. So your emotional intelligence, especially when you're talking about business owners, this could be the awareness of what really matters to you in your business, right? I work with a lot of business owners in my emotionally healthy company program who, yes, profit is important, right? If you don't have profit, it's not going to last very long. But they also recognize that the business is a vehicle for them to take care of their people and therefore the families of their people. And they derive a deep sense of appreciation from that. So that's emotional intelligence work, to understand why am I in this in the first place at a deeper level, right? But also understanding, how do I show up to others? If oftentimes we talk to people where pot calling the kettle black type of situation where you just like, wait a second, do you realize what you're saying? Because what you do is not what you're saying. Those type of things. So we don't want to be in that situation where somebody's looking at us thinking the same thing. So understanding how we show up to others, but also understanding other people as best as we can, what their intentions and such are. Then the other component, that's emotional intelligence. So emotional resilience is, as a business owner, is, again, the ability to identify, process, and act, but especially when things go south, because just like in life, especially in business, things are never going to go according to plan. And so if our emotional state fluctuates based on, what the status of the last sale was, or where our cash flow is in terms of, paying our team and everything else, we're going to be in rough shape. And so that ability to react in a manner that doesn't create regret later, like we're able to take the punches as they come and then know, okay, when this happens, I do this. And then once I recover, I take care of it this way. So that's the emotional intelligence, emotional resilience. So what are the 5 pillars? So Nick, if I indulge you on this one, right? Indulge me on this one. So I guess you can't see it in the frame. There's a plant back here. And let's say this plant's not doing so well, right? Mm-hmm. What would you suggest that I do to revive it?
Make sure it has good soil, maybe water it, sunlight, a couple of, maybe you want to feed it a little bit of, micro grow or whatever it's called, or something.
Right? Yeah.
Give it its nutrients back somehow.
Nutrients, right? Soil, sun, water. We didn't say, let's find the right medication, right? The first instinct is simply, that's an organism made for nature. It's not getting what it needs. Let's start with that. Then we can make our tweaks later. And if you take the same approach to the human organism, because again, we also were made for nature and not this crazy modern world that we live in, we experience more triggering events that really lead to a stress response in a day than we did in a lifetime 100 plus years ago. Just the traffic, the notifications, the emails that come in, the everything, especially as business owners, even more so than somebody who's not a business owner. So instead of looking at that as something is wrong and we have a problem, nobody's broken. There's no problem. We're just adapting to situations the way we know how to adapt, the tools that we have to adapt. That's it. So just like the plant needs water, sun, soil, etc., for the human being, for emotional health, it's the 5 pillars, which are: number 1, your psychology. understanding this lens through which we see the world. It's the operating system that drives our decision making, our relationships, all of those things. So understanding what makes me me, because ultimately when we were babies, we just had two instincts: to cry and to feed, and everything else was learned. And so we're all that way. So what were the series of events? And it's just to understand, again, what is the nervous system that we're operating under, so that we can say, okay, I have a tendency to do this. I have a tendency to do that. I have a tendency to avoid this. What are the things that are going to move me forward to the person that I want to be, the business owner I want to be, the human being I want to be? And what are the things that are holding me back? So we can make tweaks accordingly. Number one, psychology. Number two, relationships. We're the average of the 5 people and ideas that we spend the most time with. Now, you and I had a conversation before about the power of the networks that we have, the people that we surround ourselves with, and how we can learn from each other, support one another. This is vital for our emotional well-being as well. We've all been around people, whether it was somebody at work or a family member or whoever it is, that's just negative all the time, right? How does that affect us? No matter how much you try to shield yourself, it's going to affect us to some degree. And so I'm not saying, especially with family members, I'm not saying to cut people out, but at the same time, how do we optimize who we spend the most time with so that we're more so than not around people like ourselves who are growth seeking individuals, people who are content and at peace with where they are, and yet never satisfied that there's always somewhere to grow from the inside out. Not because we're not enough, but because there's more to see what we're made of. Number 3, nutrition. 90% of our serotonin, dopamine, GABA, these neurotransmitters that regulate how we think, act, and feel, 90% of them or more are made by the bacteria that live in our gut. We don't even make those critical compounds ourselves. So the food that we eat drives which bacteria strains grow in our gut microbiome, and therefore affect how we think, act, and feel. And so it's vital to make sure that we are feeding our gut and therefore our brain with the foods that are moving us more toward the person that we want to be and less away from the person that we don't want to be. Because ultimately, if we're dealing with stress, it's very easy to reach for the donut. But the damage that that's doing in the long term for your long-term decision-making, relationships, burnout, again, all those things, it's not where we want to be. So nutrition's important. Number 4 is sleep. First thing to go when we're busy, but it's vital for our emotional resilience, committing things to long-term memory, mental sharpness, decision-making, and also to stave off dementia down the line too. We want to stay sharp. We want to be able to, make the difference that we are making in the world for as long as possible. And then number 5 is body movement. Motion dictates emotion. It's the quickest thing that we can do to shift our emotional state. And it's the human body was made to be in motion. And so it's important to maintain that. So psychology, relationships, nutrition, sleep, body movement.
And all those obviously play a big role in how you operate as a human in your daily life, whether it's, emotion, personal relationships, business relationships, working with your clients, customers, your employees. What are some of the early, maybe some signs to look for, or, things that stress has created, emotional health, maybe crisis for better, for lack of a better term. How can we start? What are some signs that we can start thinking about? Like, is this really happening to me? How can I prevent it maybe from becoming, a bigger issue, and maybe it impacts a deal that I'm working on?
I love this question because the human nervous system is not very good at detecting gradual change. Just imagine when we're outside in, the hot sun, and we get in our car and the AC is blasting, or maybe walk in a building, the AC is going on, right? Whether you're thinking about the temperature or not, you walk into that room, you suddenly recognize the change from hot to cold, right? We notice those big dramatic changes a lot quicker than these gradual changes. And why does that matter here? Because if we're gradually stressed out day after day, week after week, year after year, we may not even realize how bad it may be in times. And I've seen that happen over and over. So, one sign you can really look for, though, is when things that you used to enjoy in the business or in life, you're not really enjoying them. They become a burden, a hassle, maybe something that you get snippy about, or just, I don't really, so for me, one of the things that I absolutely enjoy the most is keynote speaking, being on stage. Just nothing to me like the exchange of energy that we have in a setting like that. If I ever got busy enough in the business without, doing the right things to, in terms of hiring help, buying back your time, all those good fundamentals, right? If I mismanage that and I get to a point where it's like, oh man, I've got the speech coming up and I just don't want to go. That would be one of those signs to go,
Yeah.
it's happening to me too, right?
Yeah.
So something to think about. Another one would be
Why, before you go on to the next one, why do you think that happens? Something you
in
love
terms
to
of,
do, something you love to do, now it's like a burden to you.
well, ultimately, there's only so much we can commit our two non-renewable resources to: time, attention, right? They take energy. It takes energy to commit our time and attention to everything else. One thing I'm a big believer in is trying to automate as many things, not just in your business, but in your life as possible. I tell a story in my book. I'll come back to the question, but to illustrate this, I tell a story in my book. I used to have, before my wife and I bought our house, we had this a place that we were renting, and I had one office room. I put some Philips Hue automated bulbs in there and whatnot, and she would always pick on me. It's like, is it really that hard to just turn the light switch on? You just have to tell Siri to turn it on, right? And so I was like, well, I like them, whatever. Then we get our house, and I outfitted the entire house with these so that 30 minutes before sunset, all the lights come on. At the end of the night, we tell the HomePod good night, and it turns all the lights off in the house, and a couple, plays forest sounds and whatnot in the bedroom, et cetera, et cetera. And like 2 months or so into having this house, she's like, all right, I got to admit, it's kind of nice not having to go into every single room and flip the lights on. I just don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
You don't realize how much all those little things just add up until you don't have to do them anymore, right? So when you can remove some of those things, that helps. But in the absence of that, when you are having to do all the little things, especially the stuff that you can't just pass off or ignore, like family things, or maybe taking your kid to the ball game or whatever it is, it's like, yeah, you in a vacuum, you would enjoy that activity, but because of everything else that you have to do, it's another burden, right? And that can't exist for too long, otherwise we start resenting the very things that we love. That's a bad place to be. Another one would be, you forget why you started the business in the first place. Especially if you're a mission-driven business owner. I got into this to help people in X way, right? And if all of a sudden that just doesn't give you joy anymore, it's something to look at. And the third one, as an executive told me when we were kind of going through our discovery process to work together, he goes, I don't like who I'm becoming for my family, right? And if you start noticing I'm snapping at my kids, I'm less patient with my spouse, all of those things, that's probably a sign that, that it's not sustainable. There's something that's got to change, and better sooner than later. Just remember the other thing too that goes along with your question here. We all change when it hurts enough. We're all going to change when it hurts enough. Why wait? Why wait?
This episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast is powered by Cornerstone International Alliance, where leading M&A firms come together. As part of this international network, you get access to global opportunities, over 200 M&A experts, enhanced collaboration and knowledge sharing, and some of the best M&A tools and resources available, all to help you take your firm to the next level. Ready to join this exclusive network? Visit cornerstoneia.com/new member today. Yeah, that's it. Part of it is it not, you're not recognizing it early enough. Yeah. I go back to the light switch thing. I do that every day in my house with a couple of young kids, and they leave all the lights on. And if I could just have one thing to turn them all off, maybe I might have to ask you more about that offline, how I can make my house like that, because that sounds. But it is you look at business too, when you're talking about a business owner and just automation and things that are happening efficiently and that you don't need to do on a day-to-day basis. That's how we try to coach our clients. Because if you're the business is you, and it relies on you to a point where you can't leave, then your business isn't as valuable as it could be, and you might not be able to get out, or might not be able to get the amount you want out of the business when you are exiting. And so I do find that automating your life is something that seems a bit maybe challenging and like, oh, this is going to be a long time, whatever. But if you can do that, you just think about business development and outreaching to your prospects. If you can spend a good amount of that time, automating that, like how much time that can save you. You do other things that are maybe moving the needle a little bit more, or maybe more impactful to your people. Then obviously that's something that you might want to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a difference between planning and thinking ahead. Right. My wife and I often say when it comes to planning events and stuff like that, neither of us are all that great, but we are really good at thinking ahead. Meaning, if I do this, what are the consequences? If I don't do this, what are the consequences? And to just kind of make decisions that way. And I think one of the best things also that we can do for our emotional well being is just practice that, because the moment we start doing that, we start moving out of reaction mode and into being more proactive. And when you can be more proactive, you can avoid the big pitfall that you just said, right? You work so hard to get to that finish line just to find out it's not worth what you thought it was worth, or maybe not even sellable in the first place. It's even worse, right? And when do we need to work on this? Well, 5 years ago, right? So you don't get time back.
We talked about at the intro, talking about just strategies that you can use in your business, to have a return on investment. What are one or two things that our listeners could do, whether it's just habits or things to put your emotional health in a good spot to actually see the benefits of it with some hard ROIs?
I think one of the most impactful things that we can do that can have a impact quickly as well is optimizing our body clock. So what does that mean? That means following as close as possible to a day-night pattern of the sun rising and sun setting. A lot of times we'll stay up late or wake up early before we were planning to wake up, some of those kind of things. A lot of times what that has to do with is getting exposure to blue light from our devices and whatnot, sleeping with our phones as the alarm clock. But that just means that we're scrolling before we go to bed or first thing in the morning. One of the best things we can do is get an old school alarm clock, or even better, a sunrise alarm clock if you need an alarm clock to get up. After a while, you can also train your body to just kind of get up within a window of time. Normalizing our cortisol and melatonin curves accordingly. And there's some things that go into that. But when we can at least put the phone away in another room, wake up each morning without the distraction of this is somebody else's agenda for us, right? Yes, it's a tool that can do all sorts of things that we could never do before, but it can also allow us to completely lose control of our entire day if you start your day by putting that into your head. Cortisol is our alertness hormone, and it rises to the peak 30 minutes after we wake up. And also during that time, our amygdala, which is the fear center, is also at a kind of a peak state. Why? Because we're made for nature. So why would that be useful in nature? Well, you just slept all night. You need food. So let's be more alert. Let's be more vigilant for predators or things as we're going to get food. That's what we're wired for. But during that time, if we're scrolling our Facebook feed, right, or reading an email that we can't really even respond to right now, we got to respond in a while, and that triggers the whole system, we've lost control of our entire day. So instead, if you can create a morning routine independent of the phone, you start your day on your terms, doing something that really invigorates you, whether that's, yes, it could be meditating or praying, it could be journaling, it could be going for a walk outside, all of those things, or you could be listening to an audiobook, a nice empowering one. And thankfully we have the sleep focus modes and stuff like that. But at least starting your day doing a couple things, making that cup of coffee, whatever it is, and then even going outside for that walk, getting that sunlight exposure first thing in the morning. You do something that inspires you for that first 30 minutes in a day. And if you can't do 30, do 20. If you can't do 20, do 10, do something, right? But you do that 7 days in a row, promise you, your emotional resilience as things happen, as the day goes on, you start noticing, whoa, I would have fallen off my rocker for that. I might have freaked out over that before. I feel a little bit more grounded now. And so that is absolutely something that can go a very, very long way in terms of having an immediate impact.
They say sunlight in the morning is good too. And what would your advice be for someone like myself living in Wisconsin in the winter, where you wake up, it's dark, it's freezing out, you don't want to go outside? So
Yeah.
living somewhere in Arizona, that's gotta be nice. I wonder sometimes why I live here.
Yeah. um, well, I mean, what we're recording this on December 16th. It's 72 degrees, by the way, and sunny at the moment. Just
Yeah,
letting you
well,
know.
it was -2 degrees here yesterday, so
Gosh, I would say this. The sunrise is going to be at a different time. Actually, because we don't do daylight savings time in Arizona, our sunrise this time of year is actually quite late. So I'm usually up before the sun as it is. You can still do other aspects of your morning routine and then just make sure that as the sun is rising, get some time outside. Yeah, it might be cold, but let's say you're driving to the office at that time because it's rising a little bit later. That's okay. Just make sure as it's coming up, you're just being aware of it, making sure that you're outside. We just spend so much time indoors and especially around a lot of white lights as the day goes on, and it really disrupts our circadian rhythm.
what you what do talk about it, stress and what that does to your body, because quite honestly, we live in a very stressful industry where there's a lot of ups and downs, and they say, a deal dies, 4 or 5 times before you actually
Yeah.
sell it. And and you eat what you kill kind of thing a lot of times. So there's a lot of stress in what we do. What maybe are some things you talk about, to try to alleviate or manage your stress, be self-aware so you can, so when you are showing up for your client, you're your best self for them.
So there's a number of things. Actually, that morning routine is highly effective for that because again, you're at least starting your day in a more grounded standpoint rather than reacting to the things that are going to inevitably come up later. Another aspect you can do is intentionally create, even if it's a 5-minute break on a regular basis in the middle of the day, set aside all the devices, ideally go outside, whatever it might be, just to do a quick little reset because you can just bring your entire nervous system down a notch and then respond accordingly. One of my favorite tools is visualization. So when we look at the human brain and this, effectively the circuits that are used for memory, what researchers have found with functional MRI studies, when they ask them to, think about really significant moments in their life, maybe it was a wedding day or birth of their child, whatever it might be, and they notice which parts of their brain lights up in which sequence. And then they ask them to imagine a future situation that's never happened yet. And they find that many of the same structures light up in slightly different orders, but it's largely a very similar process. So what we've found is that how we can use that to our advantage is that memory, which I think we all agree, our memories affect how we show up today. Oh, I got burned by this type of a deal before, so I'm not going to engage in something like that again. Memories affect how we take action today. But if imagination is a similar process, can we put some memories into the future so that our body reacts accordingly? So if you know that you've got a really important meeting that day, and this is something I practice as well, is part of your morning routine, just sit in a quiet place, and you can do this for 3 minutes even. You close your eyes and you picture yourself in that meeting, powerful, grounded, able to be there for your client, everything's going to plan. And then you visualize something going off course. Now, you don't if it's a 30-minute meeting, you're not visualizing 30 minutes in your head. It's more, it's akin to if you're watching like a montage in a movie, right, of all these little scenes set to music. And, it's that kind of thing where you're kind of feeling what is happening, right? So now you feel it was going well, something falls off course, and you feel how that affects you. But then you also visualize yourself recentering and going, okay, I can handle this. And then you get to a good outcome, right? And you leave the meeting, you're feeling great. If you can visualize something before it happens, it drastically reduces your stress response during it. Even if, let's say, okay, you visualize something going wrong, you didn't expect the question that the other party threw at you, right? But because you practiced, okay, if I get knocked off course, how to get back on without without losing the deal or whatever it is, that is going to allow you. The other thing I would say is this, right? If you're in high stakes competition of any sort, sports, business, whatever it is, isn't any edge vital? Like any edge that we have that the other guy doesn't have is going to be important. So if for no other reason, like, oh yeah, family, health, yeah, that's important. But if for no other reason, that, you know what, if my mind is sharper and if I can hold it together, even when something haywire happens, and I can exude that confidence, not just for myself, but certainly for my client, and then solve a problem and get to a good outcome, and it happens more often than not, isn't that a competitive edge that's worth investing in? Right? That's our emotional health. This is the computer that makes the whole thing go. So why not, make sure that this is operating as best as possible?
Yeah. Yeah, that's very good advice and very true because, I would imagine, one little thing can throw you off offline and can, like I said, I love how you said before, you don't really realize things are getting incrementally, better or worse, or, takes, over time, you don't really realize that in the moment. And if you can, realize that early on, then I would imagine you can make pretty good shifts as necessary with that. And you talk about our own emotional health as advisors, but what are some things that we can look for in our clients, the business owner, about maybe their emotional health is not where it needs to be. Maybe you can identify certain things that might be impacting, because for them especially, it's a highly emotional, process and event, and they've been, this business owner for how many years? It's pretty much their identity. What are some things that we can look for when we're working with our business owner clients to, to look for signs of, hey, their emotions or their emotional health is not in a good spot, and what are some things maybe we can do to help them out?
I think sometimes it's just taking a moment to learn how to listen, right? We all listen in different ways. And maybe we're great at listening from the standpoint of our craft, right? What questions do I need to ask? Let's say you're an accountant, right? Like, what questions do I need to ask from that financial perspective to be able to elicit the right answers and that sort of thing. But sometimes it's just kind of paying attention to the delivery. You ask a question, you kind of look at their body movement, you see what might be going on. And I was just thinking about a client today. Just started working with this executive team, met with a COO today for his session. And we're talking about a number of things. And I just said, I apologize if I'm reading something that isn't there. Just the way that you've talked about these couple circumstances. Now, one of them was business, one was personal life. Are you overwhelmed? And those words didn't come out of his mouth. But the moment I said so, it was like, yeah, I think I am. And I almost got the sense that, just given his past history, it's not something he ever wanted to admit to himself. But it's like, yeah, I think so. And so I think just that level of listening and just being willing to talk to somebody as a human being, right? Not just as a business owner, but as a person on the other side, saying, hey, how are you holding up? You doing all right? Something bothering you? Like, and I think, again, we talked about the importance of having a great network and people that we can refer to for different expertise. The kind of pushback I get from a lot of folks in that area is, yeah, but I don't want to open up this can of worms that I don't feel equipped to handle. Smart. Like, you don't want to do that. That is very smart. But at the same time, if like, hey, I know somebody, can I make an introduction? I think they might be able to help. Right. Now, I'm not just saying me, like, yeah, me, somebody else, whatever it is, right? A coach that can help them in this area, or it's a therapist, right? Like, I've been going to see this person for a little while. They've been really helpful to me, super professional, worth checking out. Just because the moment you do, sometimes people just need that little bit of permission to go, oh, I can do this. Okay. Because again, we all change when it hurts enough. And so when we can capture that moment where a person's need really matches, who we can connect them with, then magic can happen, right? It's really the timeliness of it all. But I think also just remembering, for us as advisors, attorneys, accountants, everybody involved in the M&A process, you're not alone at this. You don't have, just like you're not the only one involved in the whole exit process for this business owner, right? You've got a team of people. And so bringing somebody into that team of people that can help navigate Because ultimately, another thing to look out for is some of that self-sabotage. They say they're going to do this and they do the opposite later. And now there's a mess to clean up. You're like, why'd you do that? I don't know. That's the unconscious mind going, I'm not sure. I'm sure about this exit thing. What am I going to do? They might not be able to articulate that. They may not even realize it, but it happens, right? And so just knowing that, we're powerful for our clients and we can connect them with the people that have the expertise in the areas that client needs.
Yeah. And I think being able to identify some signs of, concern that you might have. And like I said, listen, just ask a question, listening. We always talk about understanding their why. Why do they want to sell their business? Some don't even know why. Some just, I'm getting up in age and my wife's making me sell because she doesn't want me to miss my grandkids' lives like I did my kids' lives, or something like that. And just like I said, just listening is great advice too, because you can find out so much about your clients if you're just willing to ask easy questions and just listen to the responses, and you'll be able to pick out some things that you can utilize to your benefit to make sure that the deal doesn't get off the rail and can continue to move forward. So Dr. K, really appreciate this. Before I let you go, you wrote a book, The Emotionally Healthy You. Tell our listeners a little bit about that. Where can they get it? Why would they want, why should they read it? What really drove you to write that book?
It was really 14 years in the making with the book. Often we get asked, like, how long did it take you to write it? It's like, well, technically 2 years in the middle of, running the business, seeing clients, everything else. But really it's 14 years in the making. You can get it on Amazon. It's called The Emotionally Healthy You, How to Own Your Past and Love Your Future. It's not a very long read, right? It's very quick. It's easy. It's very story driven and framework driven with examples and illustrations and all that. But to really get the most out of it, you want to do the exercises in it. And these are all the exercises that are at the core of the work that I do with the executives that I work with one-on-one. And so you can download the worksheets for free, or you can get the workbook as well on Amazon.
Okay.
And then this just has all of them in one place so that you can do the exercises along the way. Really, again, it's to help with that emotional intelligence, emotional resilience, and understanding how can I optimize that psychology, relationships, nutrition, sleep, body movement, so I can move forward, the best way possible. Yeah. So that would probably be the starting point. And, I certainly have a group program for entrepreneurs. Like I said, the one-on-one coaching for executives, and I work with the companies as well. So that's, and certainly businesses that are in that transition phase, because certainly there's cultural changes involved. There's, a lot of times expertise, decades of expertise that are retiring. And so those are all challenges that we want to get in front of as much as possible.
Where can our listeners find out how to, maybe connect with you on doing some of those things that you just mentioned?
Yeah. So it's all on my website, drkarthikramanan.com. We can put that on the show notes and everything else. And you can certainly set up a free chat. We can figure out what makes sense and go from there. But there's really, I designed it so that there's something for everybody, whether you're the solopreneur all the way up to, multi-generational company that's moving to the next chapter.
Amazing. And make sure to check out Dr. K at those spots. Find his book on Amazon. Like I said, The Emotionally Healthy You comes with a great workbook. You can do some some exercises that actually help move the needle to quality emotional health. I really appreciate you joining the show today. It's been learned a lot of great things that we can do now that can make huge impacts in our lives. And those 5 pillars, just even the morning routine, just small things that move the needle, over time, habits and so on and so forth will help you, become a better version of yourself, and just putting the work in each and every day is what I gathered out of our conversation, that we can kind of ground ourselves, put ourselves in a good position, start our day off right to make sure the day ahead is the best it can be. Make sure to check out, all of our episodes every Thursday morning, and make sure to like, share, comment this episode, pass it on to anybody you think might benefit from our conversation here today. Subscribe on our YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple, all the places you get your podcasts, and make sure to check out Dr. K. Like I said, the website and all that great stuff in the show notes to connect with him. And again, Dr. K, appreciate you joining today. Thank you, and take care, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast, and a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Cornerstone International Alliance. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, share, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with more insights, strategies, and real-life experiences to help you take your M&A game to the next level.